Bam.
This is Michael Kortz, and you are watching the Break It Down show.
Just a bunch of guys from Iraq that know things. We've been around a lot in that country, and look, we were just talking about how hot it is this time of year. If you've been there, you know that summer's over, and you're starting to be like, all right, now it's not quite so hot. And you said some brilliant words. You said, it's during the summer that a lot of the really violent activity happens. And your theory is because it's so damned hot and the electricity is so spotty.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at they had the government of Iraq had a very difficult time delivering essential services, whether it's clean water, electricity. It's hard enough to do that in the best of times. Now you have people trying to blow up your stuff, and you got a population of over 26 million people who are living in a war-torn country in the middle of god-awful heat, and they don't have air conditioning. A lot of people are in a bad mood. And we could chart pretty clearly that there was a lot of violent behavior during those peak summer months. And, a lot of it's just people are unhappy and they're
Yeah.
angry.
Yeah. I'm going to put a picture up here that I took when I was in Iraq because when we go to a place like Iraq and we're trying to help stabilize it, we don't account for things like this. This is how people manage their electricity there. You see the government pole and the high tension lines and everything else, and that's what everybody else does to try to get electricity from here to there. And there's line cutting, and then there's all kinds of crazy chaos that comes in because, and this is political science theory, but when the state doesn't provide, someone else will. And so that's the state. Only thing the state is providing there is a place to hang electricity from because they're not providing it, right? And so this goes directly into what we're talking about is how do we as a nation, as a Western body of people saying, hey, we're going to make this better. How do we miss this, man? How do we not go, okay, water, sewer water, electricity, how do we not get these elemental parts of the equation? How do we not get them right?
Yeah, we misunderstand that a lot. And I would add to it, we ascribe a lot of violent behavior to, pretty nefarious political aims. One of the things we figured out, due to the lack of government provided public services, you had a lot of private enterprise going on. You had guys setting up generators, running power to people's houses, and they became some of the perpetrators. When the government was finally able to present power, what you're doing is putting small businessmen out of work. So when you see power lines dropped, it's not necessarily Al Qaeda or Shiite militias. Sometimes it's just a local businessman that doesn't want his business encroached on.
That's
So
right.
there are some very fundamental things going on that I think you hit the nail on the head. We just don't take these into account. We
Right.
fail to understand what's really going on.
Yeah. Boy, that's so true. So my job day to day was to be outside the wire and try to figure these things out, right? And so in my line of work as a counterintelligence agent, I realized in Bosnia, right, when I was coming up as a young agent, as a young spy, was everybody's looking for a threat, but two-thirds of our mission is not threat. And really, day to day, what I could gather reliably, the commander craved was anything, everything. Like there was never enough information. And so when I'm saying, hey, the guy that runs the generator in this area, he keeps getting mortared by somebody, and understanding that that might actually just be business competition and not war. And if you could explain that, and I'm just taking this scenario and growing it, and if you can understand like that's business, not combat, well, the commander is desperate to know that, right? Because that's like, well, I'm gonna get into that, or I'm gonna get out of that. That's my business, or that's the Iraqi general's business, or maybe that's the mayor's business. But that's something that gives them the ability to manage their resources, which is what all commanders want to do, right? Like, are you winning or are you losing? Do you have something to deal with, and how to deal with it?
Yeah, we again, like I said, we try to put these grand motivations behind a lot of simple things. One of the probably more difficult projects I dealt with in my first tour in Iraq, we were trying to separate Sunni insurgent groups from Al-Qaeda. And we were dealing with the security emir for Jais al-Islami, Army of Islam. They were operating out of Abu Ghraib, first person that our contacts had really worked with. And we gave this guy a lot of confidence building measures. We wanted to see attacks on coalition troops go down. Eventually, we wanted to see Al-Qaeda go away, and literally Al-Qaeda bodies started showing up in the street. So we're working through this process, and finally, in one of our meetings, I asked him, hey, what do you need? Now, you remember, this guy is on a terror watch list. This is a guy that, in my mind, he's a terrorist and all the evil things that connotates. He looked at me and said, need our school teachers paid. You know, set me back on my haunches and said, what do you mean? He said, well, we're a Sunni school district. School teachers all over Iraq are paid from Baghdad, and it's run by a Shiite Ministry of Education. They're not paying our school teachers. By April, we'll be out of money. We got 1,700 military-age males in high school. They're going to be on the street, and Al-Qaeda is going to be trying to scarf them up. This guy went from being a terrorist, in my eyes, to being a dad in a really lousy situation. And our entire focus at that point shifted to encouraging, cajoling, threatening the Iraqi government, do your job. Pay the school teachers, quit growing terrorists. Let's make your country work. But those are the things that unless you start peeling that onion back, you don't get it. You don't understand those.
Yeah, let's spend a minute in this, because this is, and this, part of the reason why I want to have this conversation is because we're about to go to Ukraine. And in some capacity, we, the Western we, are going to be there. And we're going to deal with these similar problems. Maybe they're in different, and people will make the mistake of saying Ukraine is nothing like Iraq. But we are the same thing. We are the same body that goes with the same problems, and we tend to not learn it. So one of the questions is how long does it take someone, because we're not trained to do this, right? We have to learn this on the ground. So how long did it take for that lesson for you to go, oh my God, this is a dad? One of the things we were taught was this is sectarian violence. It is a political divide, right? And so they're fighting politically. And so you might say, oh, it's because they got the wrong kind of Jesus, but that really isn't the problem. They're not having a religious fight. It's more like blacks and whites. That's the way I saw it. That's what it was explained to me by both Sunni, Shias, Kurds, all the different sects. They're like, you're missing it. We don't care about religion. Most of us aren't that religious. We don't want the political control over us. So what looks to you like Sunni and Shia, think of it like politics. And once that was explained to me, this took me years to figure out and believe. Then I'm like, oh, I see. There's power involved, and it's not religious. It's not about belief. It's not about Islam. It's about who is controlling the money and how the influence in the government is happening. And it was much more complex than I had realized, but the blinders had to be taken off. The training had to be removed. I needed the training so I could be there, so I could try to understand, but then all of that stuff had to be washed away. And for me, and I had daily access to the ground, right? And it still took me forever to unlearn, to learn, and figure it out. So what do you think? How long does it take to be able to go, oh, doing this wrong all this time?
Yeah, you mentioned having been in Bosnia. I got 2 tours in Bosnia. Spent a lot of time in Sarajevo and then up in Tuzla. And we knew right off the bat. I got there early. I got there in mid-96, chief of contingency operations for I-4. And we thought we were in a religious war.
Right.
We thought we were in a fight over theology. The smart people in our group were Brits, and they came in with Northern Ireland experience, which has the Catholic Protestant issue. And they quickly explained to us, this is not a theological fight. This is a political fight. And even more complex than that, we finally realized this isn't war in any form that we have experience in. We actually called in the head of the organized crime department in New York City to come start talking to us about how organized crime operates, how these families operate. We started mapping Bosnia like it was an organized crime operation.
That's right.
Yes, there are labels of Serb, of Bosniak, of Croat, but those are labels that describe political schisms, not religious schisms. That
Yeah.
same model rolls over into the Middle East, and you have people that would ascribe a theological fight to it, but it's not a theological fight. These people are not arguing about who is the inheritor of Islam after Muhammad died. They're having a fight about who has control of natural resources, who has control of governments. Saddam was not an Orthodox Sunni. Most Sunnis in that country were oppressed by Saddam.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the suppressed Shiites didn't understand that it was that nuanced. And once they ascended to power, thanks to us, the leadership decided to just take out their vengeance on all Sunnis. And they lost sight of what was going on, and they ascribed to it a certain amount of theological fight. But really, the core came down to control of resources.
Yeah.
Who's managing this stuff?
When we were on the ground in Bosnia, we didn't know. Here's the other thing is, and I'm hard on us, the U.S. in this case, because we really weren't trained. And the counterintelligence unit that I was with, we were really the tip of the spear. This wasn't a combat fight. So it didn't matter tanks, didn't matter infantry, didn't matter artillery. It was these ground collectors who had limited access to the ground. And so we went out and we had some training in language, but nothing for real. We had some linguist capacity, but we were limited by what we had access to and how good it was. And we were limited by the fear of people getting hurt. So we could only kind of move around. We were fortunate in our area that we were able to skirt the rules with the 2-vehicle convoy and a cluster of camps. And so we could define what the cluster was, and we were able to move around quite a bit. And we had an NCO, and quite honestly, we had a W1 in a medical brigade. So this is an interrogator W1 who's a black female who basically is bulletproof. So she could take an ass chewing and be like, I just don't care. None of you guys matter to me. You're medical people. And so chew on my ass all you want. And so I remember a chemical officer got mad because they saw myself and my partner, we're counterintelligence agents. And they're like, I saw your guys out sunning themselves today. And his chemical people had no job. And so they were running detailed convoys. And so she said, well, and this is like in the command and staff evening brief. And she said, you don't know what my guys do. And if you want to see what my team does, you're welcome to ride along with us. But if you want to understand like what they do, like that's what it takes. Or you guys could just get better scores than their ASVAB scores. Leave my guys alone. And then the boss is like, does anybody have a problem with Chief Smith's team? And then they all shut up because, we were left alone to go do that job. So we had to go out every day and invent what we were going to do. And so we had to learn all that stuff you're talking about. Like, wait, what do you mean you're a Bosnian married to a Croatian? And down the street, like, what do you mean you're a Serbian married to a Croatian? Wait, what do you mean in this valley there are Bosnian Serbs, Serbian Croats, and then some of them killed the others, and it's intra and inter and what do you? And we had to learn all this stuff live on the ground, and it was like none of this makes any damn sense. And so the few things we did learn were not even pedestrian in terms of what this one region, and this one region was in no way unique. It was very normal. And so you would see these valleys where it'd be this house, this house, this house, this house that were completely blown apart. And you would ask, like, well, they had this kind of roof. And that means that they were Bosnians, and all the Bosnians got killed because of this patrilineal line. That patrilineal line goes back to this ancient clan fight. And you're like, this is Hafkins and McCoy's?
Well, we keep dropping ourselves into the middle of cultures that are tribal, and we're not Americans by and large, other than our sports teams. But the importance of tribalism in American society is infinitesimal compared to some of these older cultures that we find ourselves in the middle of, and we just don't get it. I mean, you can see that library behind me. Anytime I went somewhere, 2 tours in Bosnia, 2 in Iraq, I made it my business to know more about that society than the average citizen of that country knew. And the amazing thing to me is how little our senior leaders, particularly in elected office, understand where they are trying to inject the military element of power into to try to achieve some outcome. Very frustrating. I mean, I think we all know the first 3 years in Iraq, 03 to 06, we pretty much wasted. Internecine fighting within the Pentagon and the State Department, our misunderstanding of who's who in the zoo. And quite honestly, I think it wasn't until General Petraeus came on board that we got to, okay, let's slow this train down. Let's understand what we're doing, and let's really engage in a thoughtful manner of trying to get to where we can achieve a sustainable outcome. And we're just historic for doing this. The first thing we try to do is race to an election. That's it. Let's have an election. That'll fix everything. Democracy is the cure for every problem. And all we do is elect the bad guys to political office. The strong men end up representing their clan. And so now we've legitimized the people who are at the source of the problem. And we have not figured this out, that this is a long, time-consuming process if you want to influence a tribal culture to a different kind of outcome than they were currently headed.
We have this current fight right now in Ukraine that we're deeply invested in, to the tune of now doing long-range missiles. And I'm just going to be critical here for a second. We see Secretary Clinton getting involved with the pending reconstruction, and I don't know that she's earned the right to have that privilege. She hasn't proven to be great at this stuff. But when we see this, we know it's coming. I just worry that we're going to just do the same thing again. We're going to send people downrange. We're not going to be committed. We're going to expect it to turn around in 6 months after the first or second election. And this is a place that this is a fact. Michael, this is going to be true. Russia is going to be the neighbor of Ukraine. These guys are going to have to work together financially in terms of business. They have neighbors on either side of them that have to pass their goods through this region, and they're just going to have to do business together. We can't cancel Russia, and there are Russians in Ukraine that are going to have to decide if they want to be Ukrainian or Russian, and it's not going to be on us to figure that out. And some of that stuff is really none of our business. And here's the other thing: is Ukraine has all this wealth and all these great business people. And if we leave them alone, they will know the best path to get Ukraine's business up and running fast. But we're desperate to cancel all these business people and call them oligarchs, because we just cannot stand successful business people in another country. We kicked all the good Iraqis out. We're like, you went to the London School of Economics. You need to leave here and go to Jordan. Take all your money and your knowledge with you. We can't have you here. And so we're going to do the same things. Am I right, or do you disagree?
No, I don't disagree. I think there are some differences in Ukraine versus our experiences in Iraq and Bosnia. And I think the principal thing is there is a external aggressor that we're interested in. Russia did invade Ukraine. Now, I have family members who work in Russia, married to Russians, and it's really interesting to hear their perspective as Americans who have basically integrated into Russian culture, although out now. Slightly different perspective. They don't see Ukraine as the full protagonist that most of the Western world does. But, we live with the fact that Russia is not a liberal democracy. Russia is run by a guy who would like to put the band back together. Now, he sees NATO and the expansion of NATO as a threat, and I can understand that perspective. Although, the fact is that NATO has never attacked Russia. Russia has gobbled up Eastern European countries. So there is a concern if you're a Hungary, if you're a Finland, if you're a Estonia, Latvia, you're concerned about unchecked Russian aggression. That's a legitimate concern. Are there a lot of Russians in Ukraine? Yeah, you have to go back and look at the history. We go back particularly, Stalin tried to starve Ukraine. Stalin transplanted a lot of ethnic Russians into Ukraine. And then Khrushchev ceded Crimea to Ukraine. So there's a lot of history tied into that whole animal. Yes, we like to put labels on people. We like to say that Ukraine is corrupt, full of graft. Said, yep, they're probably a lot like all their neighbors. And based on watching local news or even national news here, I'd say, yep, they're probably a lot like us. We seem to have our own share of graft, corruption, and political intrigue going on. And so I'm not sure we're in a position to judge someone else. What I do know is Ukrainians are fighting for Ukraine. Unlike some recent examples that we have seen, Afghanistan in particular, the Ukrainians did not flee. The Ukrainian leadership did not flee. They are trying to fight for their country. They have not asked for American or any Western troops. They've asked for material support. Fair enough. We've been the arsenal of democracy in the past. We understood that the cost of providing advanced weaponry, that's the coin of the realm, but we're not spending the blood of our youth. I would rather spend the coin of the realm than the blood of our youth. But ultimately, when and we're seeing, Lavrov made some comments in the last couple of days about understanding how Crimea could be returned to Ukraine under Russian willingness. Well, that's the first time we've heard any comments like that. So what does that mean? Can Ukraine exist non-aligned? Even if Ukrainians want to be a member of NATO, could we accept the fact that Russia can't stand that, but they'll leave? Managing a reconstruction. Yeah, we're not good at that. We are not good at that at all. And you're right. I think Ukrainians know what they want. Ukrainians have successful people. They do have a functioning government. The one thing I think I would insist on, and we haven't done it yet, is we have no IG involved. We're sending hundreds of billions of dollars worth of funds and material to this country. And we right now have no accounting within that country of how those resources are going. I think that's something, we did that both in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I think the American people could be a little more accepting of what we're doing in Ukraine if we were better able to account for how those resources were spent. But I agree with you. Let the Ukrainians rebuild their country. They know what they want. They know what they need.
Yeah. So when you see, for example, Secretary Clinton involved in reconstruction, I mean, her record on success in that is and whatever number of reconstructions and the projects. Why does she get involved in this? Like, what? Here's the thing let's forget about Secretary Clinton for a second. When the policymakers get involved in these things, they don't have that collection of books that's on your back wall back there. They don't listen to folks that go on the ground and go, hey, hold on, slow down for a second. They need electricity. Well, they have electricity. Well, no, they don't. I was in the man's house yesterday. I remember I would see like the electricity report. It'd be one of the things I would go out and I would check when I was in Iraq. And I'd be like, look at the fan on the ceiling. And I would ask, like, when is the electricity on? Like, no shit, don't lie to me. I'm your voice. And they're like, you can come here any day, any time of the day you want. Most of the day you won't see electricity on. And I'm like, okay, well, where do you get it from? And it was never from the main grid, right? And so we would lie to ourselves. And we did this in Afghanistan too. We would always lie to ourselves because we can't bear the possibility that we're failing. So when you say that we suck at this reconstruction thing, it's because we cannot take the hard truth. And we don't allow people like Michael Kortz and Pete Turner to go out and say, here is where we are at. Here is where the money that you are sending, here is where it is going. Yeah, we just did a show yesterday, on Friday, and we were looking at Afghan customs, and they are literally doctoring the legal customs forms as they pilfer money out of the system. And we know that happened in our happens probably in our customs systems. And we're going to see the same thing as we put our money into that system. And we have an election coming up, and folks are tired of having their money go somewhere else when we have problems here.
Yeah, I understand that, certainly. I still support the idea that Ukraine's cause is a worthy cause, and it's in our interests.
Agreed.
Talk about the reconstruction stuff. And, I don't know if you remember the name Paul Brinkley. Paul Brinkley was the appointee of both the Bush administration and then carried over into the Obama administration for economic revitalization in Iraq. I went with him to Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is right on the Syrian border, closer to Damascus than it is to Baghdad. And the one main source of employment in Al-Qaeda was a superphosphate plant. And it was pretty primitive, but this is one of the main resources that Iraq has besides its petrochemical industry, its hydrocarbons. Superphosphates are a huge resource, a huge exportable product. So Brinkley's in there with the plant manager and says, hey, we need to do this, 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 and this. We're going to get you money to do this, this, and this, and we're going to automate it. And the guy said, stop. I don't want all that. So what's the matter? He said, Brinkley goes, I can take you from 250 employees to 30 employees and make you more productive. He says, and I don't want you to do that. He says, right now we're consuming our own product. Whatever I can produce is going to domestic requirements. What's more important in this country right now is employment. Everybody who doesn't have a job is carrying an AK for somebody else. And if I can hire 250 guys here and pay them a living wage, that is 220 guys that are not on the street if you modernize me and bring me down to 30. Now, maybe someday when we're shipping internationally, when we have a product and our country is stable, we'll develop other forms of industry. But today, I don't need you to make me that modern. And we were tremendously challenged with coming to grips with the fact that the biggest problem they had was employment. Put people to work. I took the security emir for Jaish al-Islami, Abu Azam, to an economic revitalization conference in the western side of Baghdad. And it basically, I showed up with the head of the 5 families. People fell out of their chairs when I walked in with this guy. He is a known bad guy. But he walked in, and they are trying to establish a asphalt plant. They're trying to get an asphalt facility running again. Problem is people keep attacking it. Yeah. And Abu Azam goes, hey, I'll tell you what, why don't you pay my guys to provide security? I didn't dwell on the fact that maybe it was his guys that were attacking it. But the fact was, we found a way to take his guys off the street, let them keep their AKs, secure the facility, and what we ended up with was employment for Iraqis, paved roads, and the ability to start moving forward. We have to step away from some of our own constructs and understand what works there. I know you've heard the phrase Iraqi okay. It may not play in Peoria, but it works fine in Ramadi.
Yeah, I was big on the Iraqi inspired, Iraqi led, Iraqi provisioned. And if you had those 3 elements, and that's a hard test, man. Look, if you're the boss, you do whatever. That was what I would say. You're the commander I'm working for. You're the boss. By exception, do whatever you want to do, but don't override that. We love to overpower whatever was there and dominate that, but give them a chance, allow them to fail even. Like, hey, this is your thing. Do you want me to bring water? No. You want me to shut? Do you want me to leave you alone? Can Pete go and watch? Well, all the rest of us will stay away. And Pete promises to not ask any questions. And then, Pete can come watch, or fuck Pete. No, he can't. I'll let Pete come afterwards and then I'll tell him what happened, all the way through. Like, that's the whole process, but we hate that. We will on October 1st conduct save Iraqi operations. It's like, and then the arrow goes this way across the screen, and then we will do this throughout our deployment and we will achieve victory. And it's like, it doesn't work.
Everybody wants those great charts at the BUA that have measurable outcomes of success, when in fact, you got to listen to the Iraqis. You had to listen to the Bosnians. I got into it with Holbrooke, who championed the Dayton Accords because of the fact that you beam in and out of the country, tell them what they need to do. No, you got to spend time there on the ground. You got to talk to people. What do you need? How do we get you from here to there? And where is there? Tell me where there is. we're here to help you. But ultimately, it's your country. You have to be able to live with yourself, and an American solution simply may not work there. American resources may help them find an Iraqi, a Bosnian, an Afghani, a Ukrainian solution. Nothing beats having dollars available. Nothing beats having great toys. But ultimately, these people have to find a solution that they can live with.
Yeah. 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 And they can sustain it. I was often the person who would come up to the Iraqi or Afghan elder and I would say, hey, we're leaving. And they'd be like, yes, I know. And I'm like, you don't understand what I'm saying. 6 weeks or less. And they're like, I understand. Yes, you always say this. And I'm like, you need to listen to me right now. We're leaving. So whatever you need to let me know right now so I can let these guys know to leave this stuff behind, because we're going to take some stuff, we're going to leave some stuff, but we are leaving 100%. And because we were such bad partners, we would never say, hey, Mayor, we're taking off. We're never going to be back. And so you would see the look of terror on their eyes. They're like, wait, you're leaving? Like, you're really leaving? You're leaving. I need the generator. I need all the fuel you can give me. And they had a list of things. They're like, if you're leaving for real, and like the brass and the tax would all get together. And then you go back to the commander and be like, they want you to leave the water treatment plant. They had this list of things. And we'd be like, oh, not a chance we're leaving that stuff. And so you leave this person in the lurch, and we weren't even going to tell them. Like, it's so insane. I wrote a whole paper on it called Transition Operations, where we don't have the common courtesy to let this person know. And then I would go around town and I would say, the Americans were going to leave in, say, a month or two. What would it be like? Oh, we'd all be dead. We'd all be dead. These are all the government people. And sure enough, we would leave, and what would happen? There'd be fights. Yeah.
One of my favorite events I attended, I was basically the scribe for a British 3-star. And we were meeting with the leadership of Anbar province. And so we had the governor, we had mayors of Fallujah, Ramadi, Achaim, we had Sheikh Sitar, we had people on some very bad lists, we had Abu Ail of Ansar al-Sunnah. We had a whole host of Sunnis from Anbar. Other side of the table, we had leadership from the Maliki government, and they're all Shia. And Anbar province and the Baghdad government were not getting along with each other. Literally, you had the Baghdad government running operations against Sunnis in Anbar province. And we were trying to sort this out and, calm everybody down. About 3 hours, copious notes, nothing's getting anywhere. Ready to break up the meeting, and I looked at my boss and said, hey, can I talk to him? He says, I'm not sure what you're going to do that I can't do. He said, well, let me try something. And I had recently been adopted by this gentleman, Abu Wa'il, who was the head of Ansar al-Sunnah. It's a whole different story. But so this meeting's taking place, and I sit there, took a little bit of liberty with my position, and said, hey, my name is Akid Courts, Colonel Courts, and I am the senior representative of President Bush. Well, I was the senior American in the room. I thought that was good enough. That impressed him, and said, mistakes have been made. You've made mistakes. We've made mistakes. But Saddam is gone. He is gone, and he's not coming back. But you all can't get along with each other. And I got to tell you, we're about to have an election. And the new government is going to take us out of here. And we're going to leave. The American people are tired of spending our treasure and our blood in your godforsaken country. And you all can't figure out how to get along with each other. So we're going to leave. And what we're going to do is put a fence around your country. And all you guys over here, all you Shia, you're going to invite all your cousins. And all you Sunni over here, you're going to invite your cousins. And you're going to have something called the Islamic Reformation. And if you don't know what that means, you need to look up 16th century European history and learn how 100 million Europeans killed each other because they couldn't figure out when to kneel in church. And you're going to do this. And we're going to let you all kill each other. And when every last one of you is dead, and the words of your blessed prophet are never spoken on this planet again, we're going to send in ExxonMobil to take out the only contribution you've made to the planet in the last century. they are not accustomed to being spoken to like that. You know, it was dumbstruck. My British 3-star looked at me like, I can't believe you just said that out loud. And there's Abu Al sitting across the table. He said, well, this is my son Michael, and I think he speaks truth. Maybe we need to talk some more. But, you know, there had to be this realization that we were going to leave. Now, I will tell you, you know, we started to leave once, and then we did the surge, and we went back in. And there really were two surges. There was a surge of forces, and then there was a surge of operations. You know, we didn't boil the frog. We brought in essentially an additional division and thickened the belts around Baghdad in 07 to early 08. But the common theme from the Iraqis when we started coming back in was never before in our history has someone wanted more for us than from us. And we really had an opportunity at that point. I think you're frozen. Am I talking to myself? Okay. Pete, I'm not seeing any movement or hearing anything from you. Don't know whether I'm still. Oh, there you are. Okay.
I'm back.
You were frozen.
Yes.
Or maybe I was frozen.
So the belts around Baghdad's where I lost you, but did you finish your point?
Yeah, I don't know if I was going out or not, but you know, essentially, when we started coming back in and thickened those belts and had this thunderclap of operations that really went after the Shia militias, we pushed Al-Qaeda completely out. You know, the common theme from the Iraqis, regardless, you know, leadership, person on the street, Shia, Sunni, Kurd, didn't matter, was never before in our history has somebody wanted more for us than from us. And we really had that opportunity. And sadly, when we passed the baton in early 08, 09, when we passed that baton, we just left. We left them in the lurch. And we know where it went now.
Yeah, well, and also they had the, you know, and look, who knows, right? We're still a little early in the history to know for sure, but we had the first election, and it was a surprise to the Sunnis. Now, like, oh man, this election things are going to happen, and so then they had to fight back with force to get some of their authority back, because it's like these elections are going to hold. This is actually how it's going to go, and so they were behind. And then the second election happened, and they're like, this is really bad for us because there actually are more Shia here. They actually are going to take power. And so they were using that you know, they were using fighting to try to even the playing field. And there are a lot of scores to settle. And so people, then one of the things we learned was, so I was part of the time I was in southeast Baghdad province by the Stephan Arch. And it was another little triangle of hate over there. And there was as much intra-tribal fighting as there was intra-tribal fighting. And it was a social mess to sort that out, to the point where it's like, this is just not easy to know what to do. And my brain was just spinning all the time as we were learning about this one particular area. And to understand who the bad people were and the good people, the alive people, the refugees, the people that were going to come back. It was really, really hard. I want to back out of this, though, and I want to get back to the policymakers, because when they make mistakes, and I want to put a picture up here. Here's a State Department guy I hate these pictures when they have like the white arm and the brown man all together, you know, or the hands clasping on the slide. This for me is always a tell that there's bullshit going on, right? And they're talking about a thing called the Green Medine, which is where I was, the Medine district. And the State Department fell in love with this co-op because they love co-ops. And when these programs fail, even though they lie to themselves, they spend all this money and they find an English-speaking person who wears a great suit and all that kind of stuff, there's no penalty when they get this stuff wrong. There's no penalty when the policymakers read a paper and they're like, this is the theory, and it's whatever it's going to be, this kind of agriculture or this technique in business or this grant program that fails in Afghanistan or whatever it is. There's no penalty when they get that wrong. And we spend years and iterations and iterations of the same beginning that never gets anywhere. And so we waste a lot of time, a lot of resources, a lot of treasure, all of these things going nowhere. What do we do about that part of our process? It's horribly broken. You have this policy gear just spinning, completely irrelevant to what's going on at the ground truth. A friend of mine is a guy named Robert Hunter. He was the diplomat. He was the ambassador for NATO for President Clinton. And he and I will talk. And he's like, I always look for guys like you who are on the ground. So me as the ambassador, I know what's going on. I can never find enough guys like you because I can't know enough about what you know, because he gets it. He doesn't want to be irrelevant. He has got so much power. He's got to be very careful who he talks to, but he's like, I need more guys like you. That's not a common thing. Most of these guys are incapable of talking to that person because they're protected from people like me, people like you, who are like, oh no, that doesn't work. Oh no. This whole thing you've been told that's great. No, Pete's there every day of the week, and it's never actually working except for the day the State Department shows up with money. That's the only day it works. So what do we do about that part of the process where the theory and the policy fail because they're not grounded in reality?
Yeah, we have let our activities become too politicized, and I'm not going to restrict it just to the State Department. I think we have the same problem in uniformed services. We don't fire a lot of senior leaders for bad operational decisions, and we've made some. I think back to the history of the Second World War, and not a single one of the division commanders that was in command when the war started survived their command. And I don't mean they got killed. I mean they got fired. They were not prepared to lead our nation in this grand endeavor. And I believe the same type of activity took place in the State Department and all the other government agencies. We were serious about it. We were serious about the outcome. Can you think of anything that we have done since the Second World War where we defined success? We put out some vague terms, and I'm talking about take DIME, the elements of power, diplomatic, information, militarily, and economic. We haven't defined what success looks like. So if you don't define success, it's hard to punish failure.
Yeah.
You only know you fail if you have something to measure it against. And so we're willing to dip our toes in the water and experiment. And I wouldn't want to create an environment that was so risk averse that people aren't willing to try things, because we've got to be willing to try things and understand that some things are going to fail. But repetitive failure and our inability to respond to it, how do you get out of that paradigm? I think we got to hold senior leaders responsible for establishing success. I'm going to go back to the very beginning of the war, 2003, when we invaded. I'm a student at the Army War College at this time, and I am in an elective in that spring on theater strategic campaign planning. We have already invaded the country. The commandant walks into my class and identifies two of my classmates, says, you guys got to come with me. Now, understand, we're in Iraq now. We have crossed, we got forces going. Both of these classmates of mine got flown to Florida that day to help write Phase 4. Well, we started a war without even understanding what Phase 4 was, the end of combat operations. So we're great at starting fights. We are not so good at ending them. And we're probably not unique in that. But when you initiate operations on your terms, you have the freedom and the luxury to define the end state on your terms. But you have to be willing to do that. Regardless of party, we haven't had a senior leader. Let's go back to 2001. Let's go to September 12th. Let's make it September 13th. How about President Bush stands up and says, I'm going to put a 50-cent per gallon tax on gas to pay for this war. And people we are going to be in this for the next 25 years. Nobody wanted to say that, but we are. We still are. A quarter century after the fact, just about, we are still dabbling in this business.
Yeah.
2008, we knew
Yeah.
we needed about 25,000 troops left in Iraq for the next 10 to 20 years. We needed to protect the Iraqi government from the Iraqi military. We needed to protect the Iraqi population from the Iraqi government and the Iraqi military.
How about when there's no blood for oil here, but anybody who wins a contract in Iraq is going to have to pay a premium to us because we've stabilized this country. And so China, when every gallon you pull out, you're going to have to pay a 2% rider for us.
I absolutely support that. I mean, now everybody says, we have gone to war for decades now to keep the free flow of oil. Hey, there was only one country during the 73 Arab oil embargo that did not embargo the United States, Iraq. They didn't embargo us. That's all they got. They can't drink it. They have to sell it. It's going to be on the world market. It was a little bigger issue than just that.
Yeah.
But you're right. We haven't defined success. We haven't taken reasonable steps. I like that idea. Any corporation getting contracts outside of the United States in the country that we stabilized has to pay a tax. We're going to repay the cost of restoring this country.
That's right.
Now, under international law, we're guilty of going into Iraq. We called ourselves the liberators. The fact is, we were an occupying force. We invaded the country, we occupied it, and under international law, we had a responsibility to establish law and order. We didn't. Yeah. We did not establish a constabulary, and then we wondered why the place descended into chaos.
I love this part when we think we're fighting coin. We're fighting coin. I'm like, yeah, but we're the insurgents. So you're right. We fought ourselves for 20 years in both places, and we definitely toppled the legitimate government. Yeah, you're right. We did fight coin.
Yeah.
I want to look at Ukraine again because it is interesting, and I do wonder how much we've learned, because we have all these centers for lessons learned. I'm using the Center for Lessons Learned as an example, but we have all these, cigars and all these places. All of us have written books, or I've told a zillion stories on my show, but I don't know that this impacts how we look at things. I mean, we don't. Is the Kennedy School of Government any better at this? Are they producing better graduates? Because when I would see these young kids out there, they would be as irrelevant as any other State Department person. When I would see the USAID people, and look, I'm being critical of these folks because they're supposed to be great. They'd be irrelevant. Like, hey, what do you mean this program is canceled? I've been working for 6 months with this governor trying to get this program that you said was good. And now that it's payday, you're telling me it's canceled? There's thousands of people that are relying on this program. And like how in the world can we have all these failures? I have no confidence that if we go to Ukraine, we'll be able to resist the urge to teach Ukrainian farmers how to grow. I have no confidence that we'll stay out of the energy sector's way. I'm positive that we're going to try to force them to go green before we even get this place settled. Look, I'm all for protecting the earth, right? Here's what's bad for the earth: war. It's really expensive to knock down giant buildings and then have to put a cubic yard of concrete 40 feet in the air. I mean, that is so expensive for the environment. So let's be honest about all that stuff, right? Just not having war would be better for the environment. But I don't trust us to just get the hell out of the way. And by the way, we hate religion. And there's a lot of religion in Ukraine. We hate it. We hate it with the state, and we won't allow it at the policy level. So I don't trust us.
Yeah, we again, we don't do a good job of understanding the other cultures. The Brits have a great term that I think we have fully embraced. It's called "Don't confuse lessons learned with lessons observed." We have seen a lot of lessons. We've observed lots of them. How many of them have we actually learned? I think at the NCO level, I think at the company to field grade officer level, they do. I think our leaders, the platoon leader who started in 2003, who left as a command sergeant major And I think the company commander who left as a battalion commander, I think they learned some things. I think they figured some things out. Problem is, they're not policymakers. And by the time any of us that wear a uniform are senior enough to get into the policy business, we seem to be out of the lessons learning business.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, you know, we could speak for days, and I have seen some great senior leaders. And again, I talk about it in my book. I talk about General Petraeus. I was amazed by how he just started turning that theater. I mean, turned it.
This is the conundrum. There's wonderful people all throughout these organizations, fantastically brilliant, well-read, you know, desperate to do the right thing. But when the ground and the shoving and the pushing all get together, it doesn't work. You know, like we reach a thing I call ethical saturation, where we're so desperate to do the right thing at all times that everything becomes the wrong thing. And we can't prioritize the next thing. And so the right thing happens at the expense of the next thing, and the next thing never gets done.
Well, we put a lot of caveats on things we're trying to get done. You know, I remember being accused of working with people who have American blood on their hands. I go, yeah. And how much Iraqi blood do you think we have on our hands?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
That's going to be the limiting factor to us trying to get to a better set of conditions than we're currently in.
Yeah.
We leave now. You know, that's the nature of war. The nature of war is trying to make peace with people who you were fighting with.
Yeah. One of the problems in Ukraine is, you know, we have like this hatred for billionaires or oligarchs, whichever way you want to call them. And there gets to be the former Soviet kid who develops an entrepreneurial spirit. He makes his way up through that system, and through whatever means he gets there. And now he's like, look, I've always worked with Russians and Soviets because that's who I was growing up. But this was the straw, and I don't ever want to deal with these people again. And so they get to rehabilitate their image in terms of how we might see them. But we don't allow that. And you know what it's like if you go into the the intelligence shop for people who don't know, and you have a dossier and it's like bad guy. You don't ever get to change that because you don't even know that card exists. And look, as an intel, as a spy, I see these cards and I'm like, how do we know this guy's a bad guy? My job is to go find these guys. And guess what I do? I have to flip them and turn them into an asset. And then erase that and be like, asset. Show me the worst guy you got. I'm going to go find him and see if I can turn them into someone who's on our side. And guess what they want to be? Guess what everybody wants to be? They want to be on our side. Just let them, you know?
The number of people that are truly unredeemable is pretty small.
It's pretty small.
And
it's pretty small.
You know, ultimately, you get to what do people really want? You know, go to one of these places, pick any of them. What is the average person looking for? Well, you know, first of all, they don't want to get killed going to work. They actually want to have a place to go to work. They want to have a school for their kids to go to. You know, nobody wants to live in a constant state of warfare. Yes, there are a handful, and they were the Osama bin Ladens of the world, and there were a handful of those hardcore zealots out there, but they're pretty small. And when you can isolate those out, everybody else on the table is in shades of gray.
Yeah.
And if you can help them get to the conditions they're looking for, they don't want to be your enemy. You know, they're your enemy because circumstances have caused that to happen. The rich Ukrainian who is going to have to work with the Russians again. You know, on part of my family is Finnish, and for the longest time, Finns were thought of in the Soviet camp. Well, their little phrase was, you know, when you live next to a bear, you got to learn to sleep with a bear. Well, you know, the geography is such that Ukraine will always be next to Russia.
That's right.
They don't get to relocate, and so, like it or not, short of building a giant wall, they're going to have exchange of goods and services, and they're going to have to come to a point where they can do that.
Yeah. I was in with a unit that was doing a house clearing once, you know, and until the house is cleared, everybody has to understand this. It's a state of war inside that house. and you do your best to not kill someone who's innocent, but everybody in that house is a combatant. And so this guy, American, shot a guy because the room wasn't cleared. And then they called all clear. And then he went down and started rendering aid on the person he just put a bullet through her heart, until it was like, oh, this guy has now, until someone else said that guy's dead, you don't have to render aid anymore. So he went from killing a guy at point blank range to putting a bandage on him, that desperately trying to resave his life, until the medic's like, that guy's dead, you can leave him alone. Like that's how these things go. My job is to go out and find these dangerous people. And if I can find someone who's influential, what I do is I bring them on the American camp. And I'm like, you're going to come on, and you're going to be a VIP. We're not searching you because you're my guest. And that's how I build trust. And that sounds like I'm insane to do this, but what I'm doing is I'm saying, you're an important person. We need your help. So come on. And I put them in the chow hall and I feed them ice cream, and it blows their minds. And if I can blow their minds, I don't care how nasty they are. They have rules on being a guest in their country, wherever country they're in. And it changes the game. And I'm not doing this. Look, I'm not doing this flippantly. I'm an expert. I'm a pro. I've done this a lot. And I don't just do it on the first day I'm there. But that trigger, that thing, that's not in the book. That's something you learn over time. It allows me to meet people that no one else meets. And you know the value of that. When someone else is like, oh, you have to meet Pete, he's a respected man, because I extend respect, I extend trust, I extend that dangerous trust to bring them on our camp. We think, oh my God, you can't do that. Of course you can. Of course you can put someone in a place where there's plenty of electricity, plenty of cool air, plenty of food. And you can say, here's what America's like. We'd love to work with you. Now, it's a sales pitch, right? It's like bringing the college kid onto the campus and you're like, there's girls with big tits. There's a keg of beer. Here's your wall locker with your jersey in it. There's your name on the scoreboard. Would you like to be with us? That's all I'm doing, right? But people on the American side, they lose their minds when I tell them this. And I'm like, don't. Just let me do my job. And you know what? It works. It works.
We were working with some pretty bad actors, at least in our books. And we used a facility off of the embassy compound. It was the British little compound called Mod House. And it's actually where the two Hussein brothers had their little love nest. But the Brits had it now. And we would bring these guys in there. And the fact that some of these people allowed themselves to be bagged and zip tied and driven around for hours to come in and meet with us was a testament to their trust. Because once we had them in custody, we could do anything we wanted with them. And the guy that we worked with, the first guy that we worked with, that we made the most progress with, who really thought, I like where the Americans are going, as he laid out conditions. And we asked him, what are your conditions? He said, why are you willing to work with us? I said, well, let's see. The Iranians want us dead. My government wants us dead. The Shiite militias want us dead. Al-Qaeda wants us dead. And you're hunting us, and you're better than the rest of them. But you want those other people dealt with, and you say you'll leave. So if you don't leave, that's another story, but I'm willing to work with you. And we had done things with it. We paid the school teachers. We got some things done. He said, I want to bring somebody in. And my agency representative said, who? He says, I can't tell you who it is, but he's willing to submit to your process to come in. And we did this. And I'm sitting there with my agency guy, meeting with these two guys in this British compound. We're having lunch.
Oh, and, I love this.
And the new guy, he's got his kafir on, he's all done up in his red and white, and he's quiet, but he speaks beautiful Arabic, Egyptian accent, Quranic Arabic. It's just almost like listen to poetry. And we were there for a couple hours, and it was time to go. We let these guys go, and the agency guy says, don't touch anything on the table. So we didn't. They came in and bagged up everything this guy touched, took it away. Next day he calls me, you have no idea who we had lunch with yesterday. I said, okay, who was it? It was Abu Masri. This was the head of Al-Qaeda in Iraq that we had lunch with. Why were we meeting with this guy? Because within a few weeks, we dropped a 500-pound bomb on him. We met with this guy because our interlocutor wanted, he's telling Abu Masri, hey, the Americans are legit. they want to leave. They actually want to help us, and then they want to get out of here. And he wanted to bring them in to hear it from us. And he did. And it had to be very discouraging to him to hear what we really wanted. Said, hey, we want an Iraq at peace with itself, at peace with its neighbors, a good partner with us in the war on terrorism against you and against us. And we want the wealth of your land to benefit your people. That's what we're looking for. We don't want anything else for you. We don't want to convert you to Jeffersonian democracy. You don't have to all become Methodists. You don't have to do any of that stuff. We just want you to have a good country, a good place where it's nice to live. And this just blew their minds. Unfortunately, as we all know, we didn't get to finish that deal.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny. Part of my deal was I would let the commander know, the big boss for the camp. I would say, hey, might be to your advantage to come around 3 p.m. Because I wouldn't go during chow time. I'd go during off time. I'll probably have a guest that you may want to meet. And I would bring people in that were shady outlines on the we don't know this guy list. And he'd be like, who did I just meet? Oh, I just met Abu so-and-so. Like, how did you do that, Pete? And I'm like, this is what I do, man. And what does that do with me with my commander? My wasta with him would go up, And so when I'm like, these are the things that I'm doing. And so my trust with my commander goes up. My trust in the community goes up. And I become this, even though I have nothing to offer anybody other than trust, my ability to do these things goes up. And that's why it's so frustrating when you see these flawed policy ideas go on and you see it not working, because the simple things like, can we get these teachers paid? We had a thing where the parents in this junkyard, that they lived in a junkyard, and they're like, there's two things we need. And this is one of the things I learned was the commanders want to know simple things, tactical things. And the guy says, the kids have to go to school, but they got to walk way down your guys' concrete wall. If we can put a notch in it right there, we'll provide a guard. We get it that it's about security. We'll provide a guard. We'll work with you guys on that. But I don't want my kid walking a mile that way and a mile back to go across the street to go to school. So we're not sending them to school. And I'm like, all right, that's great. Would you go to the government center to talk about this? Yes, we would. We have, but we can't. Okay, so we need to work on fixing the government and the people problem. That's great. He's like, and then that street, we need to have, he wanted a light. We're like, okay. And so the commander's like, how about a tank track to slow everything down? And the guy's like, I don't know what a tank track is. And then so we explained it, and he's like, perfect. And so we got Junkyard Tribe to go to the government center, and they had this whole conversation. The governor understood the program, and he's like, here's what I'm going to make the Americans do. And so the Americans did what they were told, which is all canned, but the tribe got to see the governor doing the governor's job. And then I went back, because you have to go back, right? I went back to the junkyard, and I said, and there's a little in the concrete door with their tribe dude there, and a Jindi sitting there right there, because you got to do it in partnership. And I said, how did it go? And he's like, well, you were there. Everything they said, the governor delivered on. It's awesome. And I'm like, the kids are going to school? Yes. I would go back once every 2-3 weeks. I'm like, how is it going? How is it going? And he's like, quit asking. It's working. But that's a real win. What did that cost us? It cost us a day's operations in a key leader engagement. It cost us a crane to go and twist that cement wall. It cost us an old beat up tank track that we threw down on the ground. And every time we went by, and the commander's like, anytime you want to go by the junkyard gang, let me know. And I would say, let's go by every 3 weeks, and then, because my job is to know more things, I'd go by the junkyard gang, and I'm like, who else has a problem? Who else should I know? And then they would talk to me more. Super easy. You don't need a big policy for that.
I think what we've been really hammering at is something I've been thinking about for a long time. Go back to our Germany experience after the Second World War.
Uh-huh.
Germany did not regain sovereignty until, I think, 1955.
It took a while, yeah.
We built German democracy from the village up. Everything we've done since then, we start at the top and move down.
Yeah.
We start with national elections and a constitution. Iraq, we should have started in the village, moved to the provincial level, And finally, after 10, 15 years, form a national government, start a constitutional convention. Let them build it, but let's build it well from the ground up. The other piece we haven't understood, we can build an army in any country. It's not hard. We know how to train people to fight. We're good at that. And it doesn't matter who's running the place. An army can do army things. But what we haven't done well is train a constabulary. Difference between an autocratic regime and a country ruled by rule of law is in an autocratic regime, the role of the constabulary is to protect the regime. In a country governed by rule of law, the role of the constabulary is to protect the citizenry. Well, that's a big change. And you got to get the government, the constabulary, and the population to all buy in. Yeah. And when we start at the top and work our way down, we miss that step. And every time we've tried to rebuild the Iraqi National Police, even local police, we didn't get it. They never changed because we kept starting at the top and coming down. Yeah. We were willing going in day one to start at the village, put a military governor in, let a military governor run the country. Okay. Benign, Doug MacArthur in Japan. Let's do that. Let's run the place. Now let's start building your institutions, all of those systems that make for a functional civil society right from the base and build it up in layers. Instead, we start at the very top and the institutions are fragile. They never take hold and we're in a hurry to leave. So yes, how do we get to that and how do we stop reinforcing failure? Well, build it right in the first place. Yeah. Have the patience, have the strategic patience to let the platoon sergeant and platoon leader work in a neighborhood and that company commander work in the village. And let's build this thing up. And let's, right off the bat, it takes as long as it takes, but we're going to leave it well.
And rotate back to the same area, by the way. It's okay to specialize and learn the language and develop proficiency and develop the relationships. Rotate back. It's fine to dwell back at home. But in 2 years, you come back, you're like, hey, Sheikh Bob, Sheikh Jeff, all these guys, I know these guys. And you're like, oh, I see the progress. Instead of the maddening new partner every 6 months thing. That nobody wants that. That does nobody any good.
Relationships. Relationships count.
Yeah, relationships count. And continuity of effort. We often talk about 21-year wars. It's worse than that because there's absolute amnesia about anything any unit before or after you was done. So I would come in and I would know that we have this amnesia. And so a lot of times I would stay for multiple tours. And so the unit would come in, but like, I know what to do. And they would pull out of page 18 out of the playbook. And I'm like, okay. And it would be a captain. So I'd go to the major because the captains can't get it. And I'd say, we for sure can do page 18, whatever that program is. And I would go into the SharePoint and I would grab the last 3 units and I'd grab their PowerPoint from page 18, the same one. And I would say, let's do this. But Major, Captain, can we just figure out what we're going to do differently these last 3 units? Because they put a lot of effort into this. They're just as good as you guys are. Matter of fact, I knew these last guys. They did a good job. They did the military working group process. They did all of it. But how come we're doing it again? Maybe we don't need to do it at all, And then the ones that got it slowed down, often skipped it, did something different, pivoted. I don't know what the answer is, but they iterated on the process instead of repeating the process. And that was that amnesia that I was trying to fix. Like, someone has done this before. Where did that rehab go? Well, we don't know. Someone stole it. I'm like, all right. Let's not repeat the rehab stolen process because that's the ultimate outcome. It's like it's gone. No idea. So we have to get better at that part of the process of the understanding what's happened before. Like, not only read the books, but read the book of the units before you. What has happened, and know that this is going to take 10, 20 years, right? If it took 10 years to give control back to the Germans. Maybe it takes longer in Ukraine. Maybe it takes 3 times longer in Afghanistan. I mean, why are we asking 10 years down the road, how many schools are in this valley, Pete, in Afghanistan? Like, what do you mean? Why are you asking me that? You should be asking me, how is the curriculum working, and what Mrs. Ross is doing on, with her third graders. Like, we should be way past how many schools. We should know way more than that, but we didn't. We would ask the same questions year after year.
Yeah, we had 20 years of experience, 1 year at a time.
Yeah. And then nobody had a problem with that. Nobody had a problem.
Again, go back to the Second World War. Now, that was high intensity combat operations over a global theater. So I got it. A different problem, different times. But when units deployed, they came home when the war was over.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to take any more of your time, but I have 3 questions I've been asking everybody. So I want to ask you these 3 questions. This is all based on Ukraine. So you get to talk to President Biden, and you get to change one aspect of the Ukrainian war or the reconstruction. What is one lever, knob, switch that you would flip, and he'll do what you say? What's one thing about I'd prefer we talk about reconstruction, but the war or reconstruction that you would say, sir, you have to change this?
I can talk about reconstruction, but you have to finish the war before you can do reconstruction.
Fair enough.
And so I would tell them, short of strategic weapons, give them whatever they're asking for. We have been afraid of antagonizing Russia. We're past that. We are way past that. And we have not allowed Ukraine to hold Russia at harm. The Russians need to stop the fighting. And it's going to be the Russian population that tells its leadership, hey, they're attacking our apartment buildings, our businesses.
Yeah.
You got to take the gloves off the Ukrainians and let them fight. Help them. They've not asked for us to fight for them. Give them the tools to prosecute the war the way they want to. Then from the reconstruction standpoint, I'm turning to Europe and saying, this is the single largest country in contiguous Europe. It has one of the largest populations in contiguous Europe. You guys need to pony up. Now it's your turn. You got to pay for the reconstruction. We bore the largest brunt of the cost of combat. You guys need to bear the cost of peace.
I like it. Same question, but with President Zelensky. You need to, if you want the support of your American and European supporters, you want unfettered support, you're going to have to become more transparent. And you are going to have to understand some conditions that you're going to have to live with. If you want Crimea back, you may not be able to join NATO. That may just be the cost of being a part of this part of the world. But there are other guarantees we can give you. And I would say, besides Zelensky, there's a conversation we need to have with Putin. We're not in this world anymore. This is not 1939. You don't get to just invade your neighbor. We take a dim view of that. Russia is a gas station run by the mafia masquerading as a country. Russia needs. And so the last question, this is, what do you tell Putin? Like, you're like, hey, I need your advice. What do I do, Michael? And so what does he do?
Yeah. Hey, what's it going to take for you to accept the fact that you are Russia is scary. It has a history of being scary. You like to paint NATO and its allies as a threat to Russia. You need to come to grips with the strong history of your country, the history of invading and occupying other nations. Do you want to live with a community of nations, or do you want to be a continuing pariah? Your people are suffering because of your personal behavior is causing suffering and deprivation to the Russian people. You are not the great nation you could be.
That's good. Yeah. And by the way, it takes about 500 committed dudes to knock on that front door of the Kremlin to walk you out dead. So don't get sassy. I mean, literally, you know as well as I do. You get 500 committed guys,
and they're going to go do it.
Yeah, it's over. It's over. And if you start making it dangerous for them in town, guess where they're going to go knocking? They're going to go knock on those doors, and it's going to be Ceausescu, you know? So, yeah. All right. Let me, anything in closing before I wrap this up? And thanks, by the way. This was a great chat. I loved it.
Well, I thank you for inviting me onto this. I love it. You know, it's something that obviously we both have a passion for and a lot of experience. And there are thousands of us out there that nobody's listening to. And at least this is one vehicle where some old soldiers get to talk about what they've learned from their decades of experience.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank